All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our third session on our Women in Coaching, Breaking Down Barriers. Our two panelists today are very highly respected and renowned in the coaching community in Canada. First, we have Suzanne Chaulk. Suzanne's been coaching women's rugby for over 40 years. You'd never know it by looking at her, but her achievements include 21 years at the helm of the University of Ottawa Gee-Gees, leading the CIS National Women's Sevens team. She took them to 2 gold and 1 silver medal performance at consecutive FISU World University Rugby Sevens Championships. Suzanne is also a graduate of the National Coaching Institute in Victoria, where she obtained her high performance coaching diploma and NCCP level 4 certification. She's a master coach developer and passionate advocate for coaching, education, and long-term athlete development, and has mentored and continues to mentor many coaches right now, including some of our Canada Games coaches here in lacrosse. Our second panelist and Suzanne's partner in crime here is Shelley Coolidge, who is a chartered professional coach and is now a full-time entrepreneur, mentor, and educator for Coolidge Consulting. Previous to this, she was the manager of professional coaching and the responsible coaching movement, now known as Safe Sport, with the Coaching Association of Canada. She has over 20 years experience as a head coach and program builder of women's hockey at the U Sports and Alberta colleges level. She was an assistant team coach for Canada's gold medal winning team at the 2009 World University Games, among many other things. She was also the recipient of the Canadian Women in Sport Breakthrough Award for advancing women in sport. Thank you, ladies, for joining us, and the floor is now yours.
Thanks, James, for those very generous introductions, and welcome, everybody. We have a lot of information to share. This is a subject that we're both very passionate about, and we'll try to keep a pace that allows you to take it in without losing anything along the way. But typically, of the two of us, we were passionate and wanted to pack in as much as we possibly could. So bear with us while we go through it all. So we're here talking about breaking down barriers and women in sport. And the big question is why? Why do we care? Why is this important? And I think it's important to remember that in this quote from the Canadian Women in Sport strategic plan, sport is a powerful tool for social change. And it helps us to not only develop excellent athletes, but also to teach them life skills that help them to go on and lead fulfilling lives, right? And in terms of women, if we empower them, if we empower girls and women within and through sport, we can transform our sport system and, more importantly, make our society a better place.
Now, in order to do that, we start talking about gender equity. And we pulled a quote here from the UN, and I'll let you read through the quote. But in order to break down the barriers, we want you to consider what needs to be done to offer equitable opportunities. Right now, there may be equal opportunity, but we're looking at equitable. And so in order to do that, we're going to talk about some access to opportunities, to work with some same-sex role models, access to training and development and support in those areas, and then access and consideration for leadership roles and positions. And right now, more than ever, that there is a significant push from Sport Canada with sport organizations to work to achieve gender equity in sport. Here again, when we take a look at valuing the value of diversity, that what does the value of inclusion and diversity look like currently in your club or in your organization or on your team? And more specifically, what does your team currently do to welcome and include women and girls as players, coaches, or in leadership roles? When we take a look here again at the value of diversity, and that we have the importance of having positive role models, quality coaches, that we know that the number one reason, and this is from research across all, not only in sport itself, but in schools, um, in work environments, that the number one reason for females to get involved is social connection. So number one reason, social connection. And then there's an identified need as well to have positive role models, quality coaches, and then again, programs specifically designed for girls and women in order to invite them in. And I'm just going to link back to your previous conversation around rule change. So for myself, when I was listening to discussions about, do we need to change the rules? I am going to say that I was an advocate against the inclusion of body checking or taking body checking out of women's hockey years ago. But I can tell you about 25 or 30 years later now, that was the best thing that could have happened in the game. We still had contact, but no body checking. So in considering that, it's like, how is your organization going to consider measuring up against these elements and continue in your conversations? And so do you currently have female role models? Have you invited in qualified female coaches? Are you working to account and meet the needs not only of the athletes, but the needs of the parents that are wanting a space for their kids to play? And then what sort of incentives are you offering to encourage more female participation? Now, again, when we start taking a look at research around this, that the self-determinants theory, or SDT framework, really talks about the importance of belongingness, competence, and autonomy. So belongingness is about feeling cared for, um, know that they are needed and that they are valued. Competence, as we all know, a word often used in coaching and coaching development, is developing our skills and abilities. And so being good at something. And then autonomy, it's if you're going to invite them in, do they have some control over the work they're doing? So to create a climate where essential needs are taken care of around care, competence, and choice of female coaches, we want to make sure that those are met. We know that will help us attract and retain more women in coaching. Now, again, we put together a slide around the benefits of women in leadership. And we pulled this slide from, again, not only the sport world, but the business world. So the Society of Human Resources was taking a look at what is the value of having women in leadership? Why would we want to have women in leadership? So we talk about, again, the importance of developing higher morale amongst your staff. It's having diverse views and opinions. It's being able to, encourage a positive culture within your sport and club. Can you flip to the next slide there, please, Sue? And I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah. So at this point, we've looked at why it's important and what it brings to your program and your club and why you might want to. But it's also important to figure out where we are now, right? So based on current statistics, now this is based on box lacrosse only, not field lacrosse at this point in time. Your membership is broken down into this breakdown, right? So 89% of the members are male and 11% of the members are female. We have no data on those that identify in another way. There are certified coaches, very similar, 9% are female, 91% are male, right? So some of the questions we need to consider when we're looking at that data and thinking about where we might want to go from here is, how and why do you currently recruit and retain your female athletes, coaches, leaders? What are you currently doing to change that dial, to move that percentage to a higher rate? And when you're recruiting them and you think about the skills and the training that you might want to do and provide for those coaches, right? So it's not just about, and again, coming back to Shelley's point about it, this isn't just about the sport world. This is true in the business world as well. right? It's important that we recruit and develop our resources, and particularly our leaders, right? So that they're able to have success. So those things go hand in hand in terms of success. It's not enough to just bring in females if we're not prepared to invest in their development so that we can support their success. So given that, and given what we need to be able to do to move that dial, think about what you currently do, and then perhaps give some thought to what you might do differently heading forward. Right? So are there additional things you can do? Shelley mentioned incentives. Are there ways that you can incentivize opportunities for females within your organization, or to bring females into your organization and provide them with opportunities within it, right? So that's the challenge here. Can you move your membership dial to attract a higher percentage of female lacrosse players and female lacrosse coaches? And to do that, we need to be able to examine the barriers that exist. And a lot of research has been done that indicate where these barriers are and why they are barriers. And some of them we know, right? The Good Old Boys Club, the fact that most organizations are still led predominantly by men. I mean, we just saw those statistics. So men are looking at the world through the male lens, right? They're not looking at it from our perspective. And so they don't consider the things that we might need to consider for females, right? If the number one barrier is lack of confidence, what can we do to try and overcome that, right? And this is not unique to sport. This is women. And so probably the most significant piece of research for me was the fact that when people apply for jobs, males will apply for a job if they meet about 50% of the criteria. So they look at a job poster and go, yeah, I get about 50% of that, I'm going to apply. A woman would not apply unless she felt she met all of those criteria. So that's a really good snapshot sort of depiction of that lack of confidence being an issue, being a barrier for women. So then when we look at some of the others, right? So add to that some of the barriers in terms of attitude, so misogyny, the stereotypes that get put in place. That certainly doesn't help to build our confidence, right? And then on top of that, the actual real life barriers that can come into play. So a female may be involved, has a child, and then getting her back involved then becomes an issue, right? Because and we don't think about some of the elements that we could do, some of the ways that we could break down those barriers. So there's a rugby club that I know in Toronto. They started making a huge difference just by hiring a babysitter to be on the sidelines with kids while their mothers were playing. Brilliant move. Didn't take a lot of time or trouble, but it took care of that childcare parenting barrier that women so often feel in trying to continue what they're doing in sport. So it comes back again to Shelley's point about belonging, feeling competent and having autonomy. So if you look at some of these barriers, what can we do to make sure that the females we're trying to encourage to participate, one, can overcome these barriers and feel like they belong, feel like they're connected to that group and well supported. Right? So take a look at those that are listed on that slide. And there are others. These are just the main ones that arrive out of research. And think about which ones might exist in your organization. And what can you do to think about ways to overcome them? So we'd like to think, when we were looking at this and thinking about what information we wanted to share, we're eternal optimists. So we don't see problems so much as opportunities. And we think that lacrosse is well positioned with everything going on, all of the exciting changes that are underway. So the addition to the Canada Games, the inclusion in the 2028 Olympics, these are all really cool initiatives that you could use to leverage moving forward on this particular issue as well. Because those are opportunities for increased female participation. So why not leverage that? So in our minds, you have an opportunity to become a leader, right, in demonstrating inclusiveness, and not just here in Canada, but around the world, right? So wouldn't it be awesome if Lacrosse Canada started to be that role model, that organizational role model that the other sports look to say, wow, we want to do that. How did they get there, right? And we see that all the time, right? Ringette has the best record for converting coaches from trained to certified. And we're always leaning in to say, hey, how did you do that? Right? Well, let's have people lean into Lacrosse Canada and say, how did you get there? What are the best practices you can share with us so that other sports follow your lead? So what is needed to begin with, just as a starting step? We're not going to say, hey, go ahead and figure it out yourself. We're going to try and help here a little bit. So what we need to think about is what helps to make that happen. And so I think we both thought that a really good first step is to establish lacrosse as a quality sport. And quality sport is defined by Sport for Life. And it's a solid pathway forward, not just for inclusiveness. It's a great pathway and a great menu for making sure that all of your programs, male or female, become high quality programs. I'm going to have Shelley walk you through how to establish a high quality program.
So again, Sport for Life has done a lot of research in this area. So has the Canadian Women in Sport organization. And there's a lot of new and current research, as well as very clear lines and almost checklists on how to help an organization develop in these areas. But the 4 areas that we're going to just touch on here a little bit today is: 1 is around good places, 2 around the well, I'll go back to good places for a second. We want to, again, make sure that it's a safe and inclusive environment for the individuals that are involved. Good people, again, it's how would you define good people in each area within your club? I think we'll leave that, to you, whether it's governance, coaching, officiating, like for athletes, etc. And then what steps would you take to move outliers to the allies? In the good programs area, again, it's thinking about what would make lacrosse a good program, and then good governance. So just to quickly touch on that, and back to Suzanne's point, it's that Canada Winter Games has an equitable policy where we need to have the same number of male and female athletes competing at games. So therefore, it's not only inclusion of the male lacrosse program, it's a female lacrosse program. The Olympics is moving in that same space. So now it's like, okay, let's bring these programs to the forefront. Let's help countries develop these sports. Let's get you to head to the next slide here, please, Suzanne. So again, just want to give you a second to reflect on what would make your lacrosse club an ideal, safe, and inclusive space. And as you reflect on that, I'm just going to go to a few of the examples. So 1 is creating an environment that's safe and welcoming. 2, it's considering this safe sport lens. So values-based leadership, the shared responsibility of all stakeholders, and collaborative social contracts. The other piece around the good places is the sport itself deemed a safe and welcoming sport? The third point here is around true sport principles. And again, this is a broad sweep from Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport and True Sport, that all sports are encouraged to be true sport, and that ethical literacy is at the center of all of the work we do around staff selection, athlete selection, and organizational interaction. The next slide there, please, Sue. On good programs, I'd like again to think about what makes lacrosse a quality sport program for girls and women. So right now, the numbers of the metrics are showing that, you've got about 11% of individuals, females involved in the sport. Now, there's an opportunity, right? It's like, how do we help work to drive those numbers forward, to help you get more members, within your clubs and your organizations? And I think that there's a real opportunity. And I think the numbers are telling you something, that people right now don't feel that it's an inclusive, safe space. So how, in fact, are we going to work with you in order to drive that chain forward? Just again, some examples here. First off, around recruiting, that Jessica was on the call here tonight, so it's like, target specific groups, former players. One of the national sport organizations puts all of their elite athletes through coach certification and training. So that's one option. It's offering apprenticeship programs for the young athletes. So, when they're trying to get their community development hours, can they go back to work with your younger age groups? Really important on the women's side is that you ask them to coach. Women need to feel invited in, and that feel like you want them to be there. They don't just put their hand up and say, I am going to do this, or very few women will do that. The next part is that once you've invited them in, it's actually providing them with legitimate development and leadership opportunities and a clear pathway for their next steps. Again, another piece is the hosting the female-only workshops. James was able to do that around the Canada Winter Games projects and programs, and that's a really important step in developing that network of female coaches in the country, and trying to get more girls and women involved by making that social connection as well as the academic one. Support. So it's establishing, sponsors and mentors, and those don't need to be only male and female mentors, and females can also mentor, younger male coaches, maybe in areas that you determine that they've got a skill set to do so. So it's providing meaningful opportunities. And that we'd also say that it's important to identify champions for recruiting and promoting female coaches. Who are those people that, if they were to ask you to be involved, that you would put your hand up right away and say, absolutely, I want to be part of this? Find out who those champions are for your sport. The next part is the promotion, and it's really taking opportunities to work with media, using social media, maybe highlighting some of these girls and women, because by providing even a tweet, for example, about a prominent female leader, another young individual who's following lacrosse is going to see that. And so for women to want to be part of something, it's this see it, be it. It's a really essential part of recruitment development. Again, we've talked about this around key elements of good programs with you. It's important that, again, programming is participant-centered. That's all sport in general across the board. And we need to think about the grassroots to podium, which was very much a part of the conversation today around, rule change and contact. I thought it's a really valuable conversation to continue to have. Providing a very positive first experience, again, male or female. It's important to get kids into sport and keep them there. And then that our leaders are continuing to create the safe, welcoming, and inclusive environments. And the last point here for the key elements of good programs is clear direction being provided for coaches' next steps, athletes' next steps, for them to stay involved with your sport.
So the third piece of that picture is good people, right? So the question we're posing for you is, how would you define good people in each of those areas, right, for quality sport in your clubs? And then again, linking back to Shelley's earlier question, what steps would help remove outliers to allies, right? Because essentially that's what we need to do. There are people that are either not engaged or not sure about the importance of this, and how do we move them into a role of ally so that they're actively engaged in helping us create the equity that that we want to get to, right? So What do those good people look like? What is it that we're hoping to be able to do, right? So examples. Organizational, right? So culture. Again, it comes back to Shelley's comments about inclusiveness and making sure that it's a safe and welcoming environment and that women feel included in that environment. And that always comes back to culture. And for all of us, regardless of who we're coaching or where we're involved in our organization, I think we all understand the importance of culture, whether it's team culture, organizational culture. It can be toxic, it can be great. You know, we want it to be inspiring. We want it to be inclusive. We want people to want to be there, right? So, and we need to be, when we talk about that inclusive culture, we need to stand our ground and be brave about saying how important it is, right? We don't need to apologize for that at all, right? So we value and support our female athletes, coaches, and leaders. Coming back to Shelley's point about promoting, celebrating their success, celebrating who they are and what they bring, right? So all of those different elements of culture and communication and place, those are the people that we want. That's what we want people to be able to do in order to create the space that we need for females. And then the self-esteem, right? So interpersonal characteristics, we talk about this, you know, women and girls and women lack the confidence. So we need to help them build it. We need to help them celebrate it. We need to help them embrace it, right? So competence, are they good enough? Confidence, will I stand out? Will I fit in? Autonomy, do I have a voice? And if we can answer those questions in the positive, then we are in a good position to promote women and girls in our sport organizations. One of the things that we're seeing more and more programs do now, and that and Shelley chatted about it just a moment ago in terms of program structure, is mentorship. So both Shelley and I are involved as mentors in various different programs. And I have to be honest, it creates, it's a really great shared learning opportunity, not just for the apprentice, but also for the mentor. And it's important to do, right? People need to be helped along. People need to have somebody that they can lean into if they have questions, right? And it helps them build their network. So it's important in terms of, you know, those interpersonal strategies that come into play in these relationships. It creates a diverse network. It helps them, and it helps us create a list of succession. So I know that with coaches I'm mentoring, I'm looking and helping them connect to other networks, to other groups, so that they can leverage those relationships and help develop the skills that they want and that they need. Examples of that. So when we look at mentors and ambassadors, so Coaching Association of Ontario has a great program called Change the Game, which targets female coaches and partners them with mentors, and sometimes with other related experts to help them dive into areas of specific specialization. The Coaching Association of Canada has their Women in Sport mentoring program. I know Shelley's currently working with the hockey program at that level. Soccer Ontario has partnered female apprentices with mentors in every single club. That's a great program, right? So those are the types of things that we're looking at in terms of good people. And then finally, we talk about examples of good governance. And we weren't going to dive into good governance so much today, but these are really good examples that we want to highlight. So the Canada Winter Games, they've adopted policies that help to check that barrier that we talked about earlier in terms of being a parent and having to worry about childcare. So now they have a policy in place, right, that helps to eliminate that barrier, or at least decrease the barrier for female coaches. Ringette Canada with their female coach on the bench, right, pushing that forward, moving those opportunities forward for female coaches. Judo Ontario, their governance network and their mentors, right? So these are really solid programs, best practices perhaps that we could lean into, learn from, and adapt for lacrosse, right? Network and mentors. So again, it comes back to making sure that the communication is there, that we're able to reach in, lean in when we need to, share when we should, and promote as much as possible. And then there was the example of the mixed gender teams. So there's some anecdotal evidence that mixed gender, you know, where there's male and female coaches in the coaching staff, that they actually perform better, that there's a balance, right? So it brings the gender balance into play in the coaching staff. Something to think about. creating space for women and girls in sport, and of course, the role models for the next generation, right? It's not enough to say, hey, we brought in this brilliant female coach. We need to then develop the next one coming along and the next one coming along after that, and make sure we invest our time, right, in that development and that succession plan. Because it's not just about today, it's about sustainability and growth. So those are the two things that we need to be making sure that we do. Put the pillars in place, but make them sustainable so that we're always reaching forward and reaching back to support.
So again, I want to put this out to the group, and I said, and if you're comfortable using the chat, please do so. But we'd like to know, is there additional information that you need in order to act within your club to break down the barriers and bring in more girls and women into your club? The next, and they say, piece of reflection or challenge that I'd like to put out to the group is that in order, again, to use sport as a powerful tool for social change, what action, small and tangible step, can you commit to take when you leave here? So what action, small and tangible step, can you commit to take when you leave here? Now, can we see the Q&A here? Yeah, so.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Mikwan's, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, so just, I think quickly, we have put together a resource that Suzanne and I worked on here, and that we will share with James so that he can forward a number of kind of resource areas, research pieces that you can dive into further. And then, Mikwan, the question is, where can we access a listing for supportive programs for women like mentorship? Is it currently housed with Canadian Women in Sport? So, or who else could compile that annually besides researching them independently? So I think, quickly, one of the ones that Suzanne spoke to was with the Coaching Association of Ontario and their Change the Game plan. It's very well laid out. They have a really interesting background template that you can use. I'm also going to suggest that the Coaching Association of Canada's female mentorship program and their mentorship training module that is available to coaches, that you take that, because not only does it talk to you about the role of the mentor, but it also speaks to you about the role of the mentee. And again, really valuable resources, and I can share the link for that as well with James. I think I would start there with an organization relative to mentorship. Suzanne, do you have any other comments on that?
No, I think I'm just thinking in terms of what I might do is just sort of reorganize that resource list that we put together so that we front end the apprenticeship programs for an easier, oh, here's what's existing, and then the others, the other resources can be on the next page kind of thing. So I'll work on that and get that to James.
Okay. And I think for us here too today, like, one of the pieces again that I would like to leave this group with is embrace your opportunity, right? Embrace the opportunity to become that international leader in providing opportunities for girls and women in sport. Again, personally, I've had the privilege of watching women's hockey numbers rise, and every single year the numbers are getting better and better in sport, and they're growing on the female side of the game, and it's not growing as much on the male side of the game. Numbers were actually decreasing. And so I do think that, we need to work here to kind of leverage one up. Like, let's get more girls and women involved in lacrosse. Let's provide them with opportunities that people are going to talk about around the world. And when you go to events like the Olympics, that Canada's on the stage speaking to all the other countries about what in fact they can do to grow lacrosse in their country, and make sure that you drive the opportunity for not only lacrosse to be in the Olympics but Commonwealth Games, that it is the sport that everybody wants to be a part of, and really leverage lacrosse as Canada's national sport.
Are there any other questions? If they don't feel supported or welcome in the least. That's a really good question. But I think it speaks to, so the question about, you know, where can we turn when we are feeling that it lost, when things aren't going in our favor. And I think it speaks to a couple of points that we've raised over the course of the presentation about the importance of network, right? The importance of having connections. And that doesn't need to be sport specific, right? So most of my network, I mean, I hang out with Shelley and she's hockey. Normally I don't hang out with hockey types, but you know, it's about creating that network. So if you have a mentor that you can lean into, if it's an ethics issue, you know, like there's organizations like the Center for the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport, you know, different areas like that you can lean into to get resources and feedback. But I think the importance of working through the problem, that problem solving competency for us, is about having a network that supports you, having somebody able to help you work through the issue, and maybe putting you in contact with somebody who's been there, done that, and has some best practices they can share. Because we don't want them walking away.
Yeah, and another really valuable area there, depending on which province or area you are from in Canada, that there are the provincial sport organizations that are set up that could better help you if you want somebody regionally to be able to support you in that space. So they all know and have access to prominent, like, leaders, women and leaders in within their regions. I don't see any other
Questions? No.
here. Yeah.
Okay, so in the absence of any other questions, then I guess we're left to thank you very much for your attention. I know that I know that James has been thinking about putting together a series of sessions that we could dive into these areas in greater detail and perhaps do some actual tangible work with each other.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Shelley, very much for everything. As you can see, they're on the screen there. Their emails are there for you to reach out. Please use those. If you have any ideas for future sessions, please email either Shelley or Suzanne or myself, and so that we can kind of put those together. And we'd like to do this with a little bit more frequency, so that you do have those networks. And you can create those contacts with one another to give each other support, and then spread that support across our lacrosse sport. Any final words from Suzanne and Shelley that you'd like to pass along?
Nope. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you both for taking the time out of your busy schedules and for doing this. We really appreciate it, and hope to do this again. This was a really great opportunity. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.